Hello, and welcome back to Get Recc'd. I am your host, Louis Falgu.
And I am your other host, Stephen Falgu.
And today we've got a very exciting episode of Get Recc'd. We're talking about Filth by Swans and Tommy Wiseau's The Room.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Happy Honda Days, Merry Toyotathon, and just a stupendous Lexus season of giving.
Almost New Year.
Almost New Year. Luckily, we're still in...
Which corporation has gotten that one?
Right. No one owns the New Year yet. We're still in the Toyota.
Maybe next year.
I think back to the classic Toyotathon fable. Remember little Tiny Tim Toyotathon?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
When he tells everyone, have a happy Toyotathon, and then he goes and puts zero down and gets 0% APR on a new car.
Yeah.
What a classic fable.
We're not sponsored by any car companies today. Just for legal purposes.
No, but if any car companies are out there listening...
That's true. We'll take it. I'll take the money.
You can rebrand yourself Lexus Lewis.
No, fuck it. I'll just rename myself to Lexus.
There you go.
Drop the Lewis. It's close enough, right? People will remember.
Yeah, Lewis is so off-brand these days. Lexus, it's on-brand.
I know. People will actually pronounce my name correctly if I name myself Lexus, so who knows? So everybody who's coming in right now, only 2 people, but that's fine. Let us know how the mix is, because we're actually in the same room this time, and we have to mix manually. So if it's weird, then please tell us. But other than that, I think we'll begin, right?
Yeah, I'm home for Toyotathon, so we're doing something a little different this time.
Yeah. So we'll begin with Filth. And last episode, to recap, I recommended this album to Steven. Before you begin, I would like to tell you an anecdote that will lead into a question that will begin your discussion about this album. So on my podcast, the Music Breakdown podcast, I believe it was episode 5, we had a segment where he talked about our top 10, or 10, I talked about 3, but he talked about 10 favorite albums, right? So my co-host on that show, Pentex, had Filth at his 8th spot, although he wasn't really ranking it. And he declared this album to be one long extended musical orgasm. So my question to you is, Steven, is that the way that you would describe Filth by Swans? Oh, look, here he is right here.
Oh, here he is.
Would you describe it a similar way to Pentex?
No.
Yeah, honestly, neither would I. Maybe half the tracks, but not all of them. But
yeah, maybe if you're into some weird kinky shit.
Yeah, it's a good BDSM album.
Yeah.
In and of itself, not like in the background. In and of itself.
Yeah, yeah. I could describe it like that.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, this album. Let me just say that Filth is an appropriate title.
Absolutely.
I hated this.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, in every way did I hate this.
Okay.
And so I think on the first episode, you had recommended me Trout Mask Replica.
Yes.
That was an unenjoyable listening experience,
mm-hmm.
but it was one that evoked some emotion, and I don't think I would listen to it on the regular, but it was something that I feel like, even though it was unenjoyable, it was something that I appreciated listening to.
Right.
This was unenjoyable.
Mm-hmm. And not something you appreciate.
Period.
We've got Pentex says, I listened to this while scraping my butthole with a cheese grater.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's where he's coming from.
Oh, okay.
That's where that just gives you some.
That's some good context for the album. Now, I didn't do that while I was listening to it, so that might have been. Yeah.
Really.
Maybe this album is more to like drown out the pain.
Right.
While you're scraping your stuff with a cheese grater.
Yeah.
Okay, what did I like about this album? I'm asking you because I don't even know what I liked about this album.
I mean, like, I can tell you why you like it, and then you can like it, you know?
Yeah, and that's what reviews are made for.
That's what reviews are made for, you know? I can't really decide whether I like an album until I watch Anthony Fantano's review of it.
Yeah, that's true. So what did I like? I thought, in more ways than one, I thought Filth was an appropriate title. Obviously, a lot of this is like noise.
Yeah.
And I did like the use of noise in a lot of cases. I thought there was a lot good use of filter and distortion. I mentioned some clashing melodies. And in a way, melody is loose, but in a way it creates some cohesion, even throughout all that just kind of random noise that's happening in the background of a lot of these. For instance, I said it sounded like in the track Stay Here, which I think is like the second track.
First track.
No, the first track.
Sounds like track, by the way.
It sounds like there's some trash can lids or something random happening in the background.
The percussion is very industrial. You can see why the album is very much an early carrier of that genre. You hear it in the percussion.
And industrial is definitely something that I would say when speaking of this album. And just I actually did not know this album was a 1983 album, so that's pretty much ahead of its time in that regard. And I think that's
extremely.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, the big thing though is I did not necessarily enjoy listening to it. I think where Beefheart was unenjoyable but evocative, this was just kind of noise in my ears that I didn't like having there.
What I'll say is, I'll let you continue, and then you can continue. I have something to say, but I think it's better to wait till the end.
Okay, yeah. Well, the other point I would just make as we're talking about this kind of use of filter, distortion, and clash was a lot of the tracks, the syllables in the tracks were very short and syncopated, and it was almost in line in a way with that noise that was happening in the background. For instance, I mentioned in the track Big Strong Boss, he very clearly syncopates Big Strong Boss, yes. Big Strong Boss, and it's kind of in line with what's happening in the track itself and in this album.
Yeah, I'd say that's one of the places this album gets its character is in Gerard's vocals on this record. Because he never sings, which he does later in the band's discography. They have wildly evolved from this point. But in this album, he's not quite yelling or screaming. He's really just almost grunting the lyrics. Like everything is just. It kind of sounds like he's getting punched in the gut every time he says a word. The way it comes out, it's so like...
Yeah, he's got the cheese grater at the ready.
He's definitely got the cheese grater. But it feels very violent. I think that's a good way to put it. The whole thing feels extremely violent. And there are two drummers on this album. There's two drum sets, which, once again, it makes the percussion so loud. It's almost like a lot of my attention, at least, gets drawn to the percussion. Which, on a track like Power for Power, for example, which is really, and the guitar line is really just feedback the whole way through. There is not any rhythmic quality to it at all. It's all the attention is placed on the drums there. Not even on the bass in that track. It's just all on the drums, which are doing the grooves.
And actually, speaking of that track, I called that out because I'm finding, as I get older, I'm enjoying more and more things that kind of take into question preconceived notions on what entertainment can and cannot be. I think what's interesting, so you called out Powerful Power, I think what's interesting about that track is it feels incredibly raw, and there's even at points so it's interesting to know that there are multiple drum sets. There are times where it's like slightly off tempo or slightly off beat, and every time that happens, it makes you question the track itself. And it makes you question what you know about rhythm and tempo. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the thing too is like what I always found fascinating about this album is if you took the drums out of any track, I mean any of them, pick one, take the drums out, there is no rhythm. It's all on the drums because there aren't any riffs in this album. There are some bass lines, but only in a really primitive sense, like on Stay Here, for example. But yeah, it's like if you take them out, you are left, especially on a track like Power Per Hour, you're really just left with feedback, and that's all you have. So it's actually kind of interesting because, especially on that track, it's like I was saying, it's not like the drums are carrying anything else. It's not like anything else is like following the drums exactly. It's all of the attention is placed there, and everything else is just sort of noise in the background. Let's see, just to call out some people's comments. Paris Minto says, "Flex your muscles." Thank you, Paris. He says, "My favorite songs on here are Stay Here, Big Strong Boss, Freak, and Weakling. It's so weird that they went from the sounds of their debut EP to this in less than a year." Yeah, that you wouldn't know, but their debut EP is a lot. There's a lot more going on sonically in that record. There's horns. There's very active bass lines. Don't get me wrong, the debut EP is good, but I don't feel like this band would have gotten far if they continued that sound. Yeah, but you haven't heard it, but it is this thing is way more primitive. So it isn't just like these guys like picked up some guitars, found a competent drummer, and then other than that, just like bullshitted around, because they all can play. They're just like kind of not.
Right.
It's because, and you hear, I mean, even on the EP, the debut EP, it's still very noisy, and the guitar lines are still covered in feedback. But it is interesting. It doesn't sound like this production wise too. And this is something that I'm going to mention, that the thing that I probably like most about the sound of this album, especially for its time, and especially considering that just 2 albums later, this aspect is gone. I'm talking about on Greed for anybody watching. But like the way the guitar and the bass sound, the distortion on both those instruments is heavier than almost anything I've ever heard. Like to this day, it's insane. The bass sounds so thick. It always kind of, I don't want to say cuts through the mix, but it's always at the forefront. The guitars sound, I mean, everything sounds so fuzzy and gritty. That's the thing, is I hear, because even on the next album, I feel like it got a little toned back on the distortion aspect. It's more, I'd say, more disturbing. It's probably tougher to listen to, but it's not. It doesn't have. It's still. I still don't think it has. And he was saying that that he thinks that album is better, and some people do, but not me.
How was this received? Do you have any notion of how this was received
At the time it came out?
Yeah.
No, I mean, so this is actually a musical movement I don't know a ton about. Some other people do. Paris, you might. But in this time period in New York, there was a movement going on called No Wave. Not New Wave, No Wave. And it's originally, I thought, and I said this in my original Filth review, and it's one of the big things I got wrong on my channel, which I still regret to this day. And some guy left me a very lengthy comment explaining to me that it was wrong. But I didn't know, because the genre of this album is often listed as No Wave. But I think that's probably very inaccurate, because I don't think it was a genre. As far as I understand, and once again, I don't want to speak with total authority, but it's not like everything, like not everything during that movement sounded like this. It was really just similar to punk, but maybe even more so, a very strong rejection of commercialism and all the things that punk was going against. So it's a lot like punk.
You can feel that, for sure.
Yeah. Now, I have never listened to any other no wave artists, which I should, because I know people really like this movement. But yeah, so that's what they came out of. And keep in mind, this was during the time in New York when crime was skyrocketing. It was a bad time, and the place that they were in, that's what a lot of this music was reflecting. So you can totally hear it.
I see Paris calling out their Sonic Youth.
Early Sonic Youth, that's
interesting.
I did not know that Sonic Youth was no wave.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But that's another band I need to listen to, because they're super popular.
Yeah.
But I understand they played with noise a little bit too, maybe even a lot. But as for how it was received, I understand that this band had a following in that movement, is what I was kind of getting at. And I know that when they went out of it, in fact, 4 albums later, they got on a major label and made a folk album. And I absolutely no remnants of this, like nothing about this album goes onto that album.
Yeah.
It's entirely different. And nowadays in their music, you can hear the folk influence, but that was just straight up super commercial. And I think it's very good, but a lot of people hate it. All I can tell you is that I know that nowadays this is looked back in hindsight as a classic and one of the best of that era. But this band, I think almost everybody can agree at this point that this band has done better things than this now. That's all I can really tell you. But yeah,
I think another thing that I called out as we were listening to this is they do a lot of weird stuff in this album. I'm not talking about the sound or anything. I'm talking about, like, for instance, Big Strong Boss literally just cuts.
Yeah.
Almost like the track is broken. Like, it literally just stops.
It just stops. Yeah.
Like, they are still playing and it just stops. Some other things that they do, I felt like the audio mix was constantly changing throughout this album. Sometimes, especially like with the vocals, they were much louder or much softer than everything else, depending on the track. And the last one, so the last track also cuts out at one point and then comes back.
Yeah, it fades out and then fades back in. Yeah, and what so I haven't actually said what I think about this. Well,
No.
we're not done talking about it, so I won't give the score, but yeah, my main problem with this album, if I have one, I mean, I do have one, is that track. I don't like that track. I don't think it's a good closer. That track is extremely sluggish, to the point where I don't feel like it packs the punch the other tracks do, but at the same time, I don't feel like it wraps the album up. And one of my issues is the fade out and fade in. I've heard it used better by other artists before. It can be a cool idea sometimes, but their use of it's just so unnecessary. And I don't know if you felt, you didn't enjoy any of it, so maybe it didn't stand out to you, but to me, it was just like,
No, that definitely stood. So of the weird moments that were in this album, that definitely stood out as the weirdest, because it's not like the fade out. The fade out wasn't punchy. The fade in was not punchy. It was just like kind of in 3/4 through the song, the song went away and came back. Same level.
Yeah.
I mean, there was really nothing about that was like, oh wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. I'll get to Paris' comments at the end because you just keep going here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
this is the first time, by the way. So what happened was we listened to this album, and then you actually played another Swans album.
Yeah.
This is the first, because I have not listened to this band before. So this was the first time where I got almost an immediate, almost retrospective, and whatever that other album was that we listened to.
The Seer.
Yeah.
From 2012. So that was.
Oh, okay. Just, it's like they're a different band. It's like you wouldn't even recognize.
So, what I will say,
although they had that 30-something minute track, and that's kind of
30 minutes. Yeah. Well, Yeah. So I recently did a retrospective of this band, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. 'Cause I knew I was going to be doing one soon. And what I noticed, because I've listened to all this band's albums, that they might be my favorite band. I don't know. They're up there. But what happened was, this sound has pretty much stayed through all of their records, except for the folk album, in some way. And on the Seer, on their newest material,
what portion of this
that's what I was gonna say. The on the Seer and To Be Kind, which is To Be Kind, best album of the fucking decade, incredible. That was 2014. So they've maintained that. What you'll notice about this album is it's extremely repetitive. Every song is that one groove for the entire length of the track. There are no switch ups on this album. There aren't a few other ones, but it almost never happens. Now, when you listen to an album like The Seer and you listen to this, the way that the music sounds, the way it plays out, the melodies, everything sounds entirely different, but that aspect has never changed. They've always hammered in grooves. That's always been their thing, is they'll play a groove and stick to it. And now The Seer, it morphs. Like the 30-minute track, it morphs. But you'll notice there are segments of that song that'll go on for 7 minutes. There's a segment of that particular track where it just hammers in this one chord extremely slowly for 10 minutes on that track. So this is something that they've always done. And on To Be Kind, it's even more so than on The Seer, where that album is really just 10 very long tracks that are each just one groove building to a climax and ending. And that's how that entire album goes. So that's the one thing, is even as this band has changed their sound consistently, constantly sounded like a new band with each record, that one element has always been there. It's stayed very consistent. Once again, except on the folk album, which was verse and chorus. Pretty basic stuff. But Yeah, and that's what's really amazing to me is I listened to this album, and actually the first 4 albums are all very much similar to this. I wouldn't say any of them are as what I would describe as fun as this. It's fun in a weird way, but the grooves are really active. It's a very active album. On Cop, it's a lot like this, but it's super slow. And then on Greed or particularly on Greed, it's all about the atmosphere. The drums are almost entirely gone. They're very minimal, and it's just like slow guitar lines, and it doesn't appeal to me very much. And then Holy Money is similar to that kind of, but with more grooves. But yeah, the first 4 albums are very much like this. It's really after this point where they started to do new things, but you can definitely see for these first 4 records that's what's considered like the early Swans sound, and it's because it is all kind of going for the same thing. But before we'll get to Paris' comments at the end, I feel like, are you done with your notes, and do you want to give this album a score and then a recommendation if you can? Out of 10, preferably.
A score out of 10. Geez. I think that there was enough there to, like I mentioned, make me question some things that I know. This is probably the first time I've also heard something that was as industrial as this album. So in that way, it was kind of new, but I don't even think that's enough to carry it to anything above like a 2. Mm-hmm. Something like a 2 would probably be where I'm at on this thing.
Yeah. So now I'll get to what I said I was going to wait to say. When I first heard this thing, so the first Swans album I listened to was To Be Kind. And when I first heard that album, I couldn't, like, and I'd listened to experimental music before then, but when I first heard that album, I just couldn't, I was just like, I can't handle listening to the same groove for like 10 minutes. I can't handle it. And I felt that way, and then on the 35-minute song on that album, I was just like, I can't do it. But after I listened to it a few more times, I started to feel those grooves, and I started to realize that they were building very slowly and subtly to those climaxes and those finishes. And eventually I thought that album was pretty great, but I still wasn't sold on it. I felt like some of the tracks went on too long and stuff like that. Then I listened to The Seer, and I felt pretty much the same way. And then I went to Filth, which I had never heard anything. Like, I listened to noise rock before, but this is as noisy as noise rock gets. Like, this is completely abandoning, because even To Be Kind could be described as noise rock. But when I got here, I was just, when I first heard this thing, I was driving. I felt physically sick. I wanted to vomit by the end of it. I came back home and I was drained just having listened to this thing like twice. And I didn't understand, like, I didn't get it at all. There was nothing about this that I even like comprehended. Like you understand the musical qualities of this album, right? I didn't even, nothing. It was just like, it really was just, what the fuck was that? Like, I had no clue. Looking back on it now, I don't understand how I felt that way, because I feel like everything, as noisy as it is, it's fairly straightforward. It's one groove for like 5 minutes. You can feel it, but I didn't even pick up on it. And then, like, a few months later, when I'd gotten more into Swans, more into To Be Kind and The Seer, I went back to this, and as soon as Stay Here hit, I was like, this shit is incredible. It just, I immediately, I was like, I love this. I don't feel like this is one of their best albums, and I recently scored it on the retrospective. I'll give it the same score. I'd give this an 8.5. Mainly because I feel like the last track is unnecessary. I feel like, what's the track? Freak. I like that track, and Paris thing, it was one of his favorites. I like that track, but I do feel like it could have used more distortion. It feels a little heavily edited in a way that I don't think quite packs the punch it's supposed to. But for the most part, I very much respect this album, and I like it the most out of their early material. So, was there anything else? No, that was all I was gonna say. So we're very split on this one. I feel like this is the first time,
and I felt like as I was listening to this, so maybe we should say in these things how many times we actually got to get through it. So yeah. I listened to this twice. Mm-hmm. On the first time, it was just a mess. I think I was cooking at the time, and it was just this noise coming out of my speakers.
Soured that environment
that I wanted to end. Yeah, it made my food taste bad.
Yeah.
So I listened to it twice, and even on that second viewing, I still feel like I had a feeling this was going to be one of the first ones where we were going to really disagree on this thing. Probably not as vehemently as maybe some other things necessarily, even though I did give it a 2 and you gave it like an 8.
Yeah, I understand. I think we both understand where we're coming from here. Because
we'll get there one day. Don't worry, everyone
sure.
out there in the universe.
I'm sure we will. But
Lewis has some strong opinions on things.
Because here's the thing. And I mean, obviously, I think.
But to wrap up, I would not recommend this to anyone.
Yeah.
Do not listen to this. This will make you cry in a way that you'll never want to wake up.
What I would say about Filth is, and I said this in the retrospective again, honestly, if you want to get into Swans, watch that video. Don't start here. Like, I made you start here because I wanted to freak you out. But, like, don't start here. This is not a good starting place. Especially because the band becomes such a beast over the years. And honestly, Soundtracks for the Blind is incredible, of course. That album is nothing like a lot of their catalog because it's a lot of ambient music. And I'm sure you've heard of the genre post-rock. Any post-rock bands, that's like one of the first post-rock albums. Or not one of the first, one of the most influential early ones. But, yeah, start there or listen to To Be Kind or something. Those are my 2 favorites, but there's a lot of places I'd recommend you start and not here. The specific reason I recommend it to him is, and I think you might be getting this by now, every time I'm going to be recommending you music, I'm just trying to freak you out. That's been my goal at this point.
Good.
And so, maybe not every time, but certainly up to this point. And so, yeah, but I think this is an album to listen to once you've gotten into their other work, and you might understand it more. And that's what we'll say about that. Let's read Paris.
So White Noise is coming up next. An all white noise.
I don't listen. I have not listened to a single noise, like just straight up noise album. I've listened to tracks. I've never listened to an album. And it's mainly just because I don't know where to start. Like, there's stuff by, like, Merzbow, but all that stuff is, like, he has, like, an hour-long album. People are like, I might enjoy it. I don't know. But, all right, so we've got... Okay, let's see what they say. Let's see what Paris has been saying. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, Swans are one of those rare bands who completely abandon their sound with almost every album. They don't even perform old songs live. Yeah, that's true. They only play new material. Swans are in my top 5 bands of all time. Soundtracks for the Blind is one of the very few albums, 8 to be exact, that I would consider a 10 out of 10, and To Be Kind is the best of the 2010s for sure. I would probably give Filth a light to decent 6. My first Swans album was Soundtracks for the Blind back in 2011 or 12 after watching Fantano's review of Godspeed, Lift Your Skinny Fists, like Antennas to Heaven. I checked it out because he said Swans were the only band that sounded like Godspeed. And then he was talking that I don't know. Anyway, but I don't recommend you start with Soundtracks, he says. I guess I agree with that. Okay.
And listen to some Butthole Surfers.
And listen to Butthole Surfers.
Got to get the cheese grater out for that one.
For good noise. I've heard of them.
Okay.
All right, so the next... Oh, I put also Star Wars in the title. I'm sorry. We decided we're going to do a bonus episode. So that was an accident. All right. So, Tommy Wiseau's 2003 classic, The Room.
So I knew we would also be very opposed on this one, too. When I recommended this to you.
Well, it is.
Let's talk about it. Its artistic qualities.
Really, a lot of plebs.
Yeah.
Can't really understand what Tommy Wiseau was going for.
If you don't have his underwear, then you can't really say you're a Tommy Wiseau fan.
Steven got me the DVD, and in the DVD includes a postcard-looking thing.
Yep.
Advertising Tommy Wiseau
with his
underwear.
his face on one side.
His face on one side, underwear on the other. You would think this man is joking, but believe me, he is not. I mean, like...
So what is there to say about Tommy Wiseau's The Room that hasn't been said? I think...
nothing.
Really nothing. I think people have talked about its, let's say, qualities in detail, but let's just go through it a little bit. So how many viewings have you had of this prior to...
So I saw this movie in full. I saw this movie in full once before I watched this. Of course, everybody knows the big famous scenes.
Yeah, the big scenes.
To the point where like stuff like "Oh Hi Mark" has gotten kind of worn out. It's like it feels like a dead meme to me now because I've seen it so much.
Yeah.
So when I first saw the film, and this was well after I'd seen these clips like a million times. They already felt dead to me. I just hated it. And it's obviously it's awful. Everybody knows it's awful. But I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, it's awful in a way that's almost indescribable. It's not awful in a way that's like, oh, this is funny. It's like long And I mean, there are the scenes that everyone knows, and those are kind of humorous at the time. But if when you're watching this as the film itself, it is long and boring, and just terrible.
That's what I was gonna say. That's what's interesting that happened to me when I watched it again. So the first time, that is exactly how I felt. In the first like 30 or so minutes, there are like 5 sex scenes that go on for the duration of a song.
Yep.
Each time, and it's just like, oh my god.
The full duration of a song.
Yeah. And it's just like fucking hell. But when I watched it again, and I said last time when you recommended it to me, I hate The Room. I watched it again, and you know what? I fucking love this. I was dying the entire... I don't know what clicked, but even those fucking sex scenes, there is something so weird and uncomfortable about how long he decided to drag out these scenes while he's fucking their belly button. Everybody knows that's the funny part, but when you watch that for like 3 minutes straight, it's just like, what were you thinking?
And it's not even like 3 minutes straight of them having sex. It's like a portion of that 3 minutes is them like tickling each other with roses and shit.
He like pulls off her scarf and he's like, what
and he goes, ha ha ha.
Yeah, what the hell? And like, I wonder if there was I'm sure he was the editor. He was probably the editor.
Had to be.
But I wonder, let's see if it'll probably say somewhere down here. Edited by, do we have an edited by? Oh, Eric Yalkut Chase. So thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
For not cutting any of that. And like one of the
happy Honda days to you, Eric.
One of the scenes, it's just like a window with rain on it that's obviously a sprinkler that keeps getting cut back to. And like, see, here's the thing. The dead meme scenes became funny again when I watched them in the context of the film and I was actually enjoying myself, because there's a real reason why these things became as big as they are. Yeah. And it's not just because they're funny scenes. It's because when you watch this movie, it's just nonstop, and yet like all of it feels like those scenes do, but yet something is so particularly awful about select moments.
Yeah.
It's just baffling. Like the flower shop scene might be my favorite.
Yeah, that flower shop, because the thing is, so Tommy Wiseau's acting in this film is absolutely atrocious.
It's not
but the rest of them are bad, but it's like, okay, this is like a bad B movie.
Yeah, they're bad.
They're bad. But then it'll cut to Tommy Wiseau in a flower shop. Oh, hi, puppies.
Yeah,
puppies.
Yeah. And like it's cut like completely wrong. Like, oh, hi, Johnny. I didn't know it was you. Hi, doggy.
Hi, doggy.
That's me. And it's like it's appalling, because I wonder if that was only in the editing or if he actually wrote the script that way, and that made it especially funny. Like they're cutting each other off.
Yep.
It's so weird. And but no, you're right. That's one thing that I think I realized watching it again, is it is like everybody else is just wooden. And they're all funny. They all have their funny moments because it is just so awkward and weirdly wooden. And even like Greg Sestero in this movie playing Mark, and all the other characters, and Denny, like they all have their funny moments, but they're just bad.
They're just bad.
You know?
Whereas he is like a caricature in this world of people being not good at what they're doing.
It's amazing because he's like, he became sort of an internet meme on the more like 9gaggy end of memes where I'm like, ugh, gross. But when you watch the movie and realize that is literally him. That's not like him putting on a funny, LOL so random, I'm an internet joke. When you watch him in interviews, this is, like, he talks like this. He didn't just write this movie poorly, he talks like this. And it's incredible. And to see him speaking to other wooden actors who were wooden in a more normal way, it's hilarious to me. I loved it. I loved the stuff with, what's his name? Philip, I think, the psychiatrist or whatever.
Oh my god.
Where there's literally a line where they say, "Stop being such a psychiatrist, Phil." After he was just like, okay, so Tommy was talking to him, trying to sort out his problems. Mark comes in, and then they tell him, "Stop being such a psychiatrist." Why would you say that? He's literally a psychiatrist. You brought him in to talk to him. And then the scene where they're about to go to the wedding, and instead they play football, and for some baffling reason, they have him run to the camera and trip, and just the weirdest shot angle I've ever seen.
Let's talk about that football. For some reason in this film, Tommy was so decided that they would just take random breaks to throw a football around.
Yeah.
No conversation. They're literally just standing around playing football. In fact, there's one scene where they're trying to egg someone on to go out play football. And he's like, no, I don't know, can't play football or something. And they finally get him to do it. And they just sit around in a circle and throw a football.
Yeah, and then he trips. That's the same scene. Because they're like, play football, I don't want to do it. And then they say he's a chicken.
Chick, 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 cheep, cheep, cheep.
How does that even make any sense? What's he afraid of? Getting a ball thrown at him? Like, it's not like they're playing tackle football over here. They're just tossing a football around.
It's a film.
I have to question, though, who would ever get their friends together and try to egg on a friend? Like, they are so anxious to play this game that they're going to egg their friend on, but literally all they wanted to do was toss a ball to each other in a circle.
Yeah.
It's just, it really is, you know, that's the thing about this movie. It really is, and Penix just said it's genius how something can be so traditionally awful, that's not the word I would use, that I'm just forced to stare in amazement. I would say, instead of traditionally, more like untraditionally awful, because you won't find anything that's bad in the same way this is.
Yeah. It is its own bad. That is definitely for sure.
And
top to bottom. Let's talk a little bit about like the plot. So the plot of this film, if you could call it a plot, is he is engaged to Lisa, the girl. She's unhappy. She cheats on him with his best friend. Some other stuff happens. And as they go through, sorry about that, everyone. As they go through, she cheats on him, and then he kills himself.
Yep.
Spoiler alert, I guess.
That's the entire plot. Because what else happens? Like, it really is just an incredibly long, drawn out. And you know, here's the thing. I think he was
and the
trying
other thing
to make
is
a character study around that.
That point. Yeah.
Because you can tell there's like scenes where he's trying to show the emotion that's going on, but in reality, he's just repeating the exact same scene that happened like 10 other times.
Yeah.
Like, how many scenes are there on the roof? How many scenes are there in their room where he comes in? How many scenes are there where she's talking to her mother about the exact same thing, and her mother has the exact same reaction every single time? Which, by the way, the funniest scene in this entire film, the line that had me dying the most that I forgot about, is when she says, I went to the doctor today, I definitely have breast cancer.
Yeah.
Like, as if she was in an advertisement. And it's, which, by the way, I went to the doctor, I definitely have breast cancer. And, like, her daughter doesn't even react.
I know. Let's talk about even, like, maybe you would call it a character arc. I don't know how you would describe it with Lisa. Mm-hmm. Lisa's character to me makes no sense in this film. Mm-hmm. So she starts and they're in love, I guess. They have sex, and then they immediately cut to her talking to her mom about how she's unhappy. And throughout this film, she continues to be unhappy. She cheats. But I think she's psycho.
Yeah.
Like, I think she is literally insane, because it gets to a point where she tells Tommy that she's pregnant for literally no reason at all. And they're like, why would you do that? And she's like, stop telling me how to live my life. I wanted to do stuff. Yeah. It's like, what are you talking about?
What purpose? Isn't this just going to make it harder for you to split with him if he thinks you have a baby with him?
And then, like, there's a point where Tommy pretty much figures it out, and they're at a party, they're at his birthday party, and she makes everyone go outside, and they start making out on the couch. But at that point, Tommy knows, and they're holding hands, and he comes back in, and they're like, and he's like, what are you doing, Mark?
Yeah.
And they fight, and they're like, hey, don't do that. Be nice.
Yeah. It's very confusing. Well, what I was going to say about the characters in this film is they are all just totally unlikable in every possible way.
Yes.
And I think that, I mean, you do see Mark have some reservations. Like, I think he was trying to make it so that you would kind of sympathize with Mark.
He, like, almost kills the psychiatrist.
Yeah, exactly.
For some reason.
Then at that point, I'm just like, well, now I don't care. Because now you're just a fucking crackhead. Like, he's established he's, like, on drugs or something. It's like, why even include that? Like, I thought he was trying. Like, it seemed clear to me that at points he was trying to make me sympathetic to Mark so that it was a little more nuanced. But that gets thrown out the window.
Yeah.
Liz is just evil. Like, that's the thing, is it's not like she feels like a human being. Lisa. It's not like she feels like a human being in any way. She's just a piece of shit through and through.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you're gonna make this is the thing, when you're gonna make a movie like this, where you're trying to actually analyze a real human interaction, you can't have somebody act like that. Like, you just can't. This is like a villain in a Disney film.
Yeah.
She's just downright evil. And it's ridiculous. Because she'll talk to her friend, and, like, just the mere mention of Johnny, she gets this pouty face on, which started to really annoy me. It's the same face every time. You'll notice she's just like that every time somebody mentions Johnny. And it's like, what did he do? Like, it's not like you're just not interested in him anymore. You hate his guts, and he did nothing. So clearly, Tommy Wiseau thought that the way to make you sympathize with Johnny was to make Johnny completely innocent in every single way, and he's just gotten lied about for no good reason.
Yeah, you just can't even grasp what's happening the majority of the time.
Yeah.
She has a friend, and she's talking to her friend, and her friend figures out she's cheating, and her friend walks in on them at one point, and Mark is putting his shirt back on, and her friend's like,
Yeah, her friend has barely any issue with the fact. She brings up that you shouldn't do it, but she's like smiling when she says it. Like,
and
she
her
doesn't give a
saying
shit.
you shouldn't do it is like the same you shouldn't do it when she tells Lisa, hey, you probably shouldn't tell him that you're pregnant.
Yeah.
That's probably not good.
I wonder,
Now, to me, the weirdest character of all of them is that kid. The kid.
He's not even a kid.
Or
He's 23.
I don't even know what he is.
He's supposed to be a kid.
He's supposed to be a kid, and he like wants to watch them kiss or something, and they're like making out on the bed, and then he like comes in and they have a tickle fight.
Hey guys, can I watch?
Hey guys, can I watch?
So two's company, but three's a crowd.
And they have
What
a tickle
the
fight.
fuck?
And then there's just this random subplot where he's on drugs, and they're like, don't do that.
And yeah, that never goes anywhere.
And that does nothing.
Which is also pretty funny, by the way, when he's just up there and then a guy just comes up, where's the fucking money, Denny? What the hell? Why is this happening?
And then there's a point where Johnny talks to him because he's like, oh, I think I'm actually in love with Lisa.
Yeah.
And Johnny's like, oh, yes, haha, don't do that.
Yeah, no, but he's not.
And he talks to him about women.
He's completely okay with it. He's not. You don't even get the sense that he's like at all like, that's a little weird. He's just like, oh, Danny, Lisa loves you too.
Oh, he loves
as a
you
person,
too.
as a human being. It's like.
And that's the resolution of that scene, by the way. It's
Yeah.
not like, oh, no, that's not what I was talking about. It's like, yeah.
Denny's so fucking creepy. He comes in the door to Lisa and he's like, can I get a kiss? It's like, what the fuck? This man, and I wonder, because Tommy Wiseau wrote the whole film. So he really did think that this is like how a human interaction would go. And that might be the strangest thing, because Denny's supposed to be a child. Is this how
something.
Is this how Tommy was when he was a child?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but like that's the only thing I can think of. Is this how he's had experiences in his life? Because I mean, even a totally inept writer, some of these scenes they just wouldn't even think to write. And that's what's kind of amazing about it. It's appallingly bad. There are scenes in this film where you're just questioning how it even got made. And that's the thing, is I've seen a lot of really bad movies before, but this and Troll 2, and this is why these are the famous so bad they're good. They're definitely not the worst films ever made, as they're touted. They're not.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even like the shot composition in this movie is mediocre. It's rarely awful. There's a lot of things about it that are just mediocre. It's just the acting and the story and the writing that's so abysmal.
Yeah.
So to say it's the worst movie of all time is ridiculous, because there are films in which every single category is lacking. Take like Manos: The Hands of Fate, which
Right.
is not an enjoyable film. It's well known for not being enjoyable. It's just god awful. That might be the worst movie of all time. This is not even close to a level of that. But the thing is, in a movie like that, you can see it and say, well, they're just inept. In this movie, I don't know how this occurred. And that's what's amazing about it. Like for a movie like The Disaster Artist to exist about this show is that other people feel the same way, where it's just like, what the fuck? Like, and Troll 2 is another one where I'm just like, I can't believe it. And I think that's why this movie is so enjoyable. I don't think it's just that it's funny bad. It's that it's also like it's baffling.
That's definitely true.
So
you mentioned The Disaster Artist.
Yeah.
Do you want to? I know you saw it. Do you want to?
I saw it and it's just all right. I mean, if you like The Room, definitely see it. You know, like I guess I'd recommend it to you too because I'm sure you'd be interested. And it tells an interesting story. If you've read the book, I guess you wouldn't care. But like to me, a lot of the movie was just kind of a lot of the technical aspects of this film were just mediocre. Shot design. It was trying to do this documentary style, but it felt very phony to me. And the whole thing, it was all right. But I think the one thing that made it work was James Franco as Tommy Wiseau is an incredible. I hope he gets an Oscar. It was great. It carried the whole film. Dave Franco was likable enough as Mark, and they had a likable enough chemistry. And you know, you could see that Greg Sestero in the film at least saw something in Johnny for like no reason. But it was a little weird where I was kind of questioning, and this is something I wanted to know: why was he friends with this guy? I didn't exactly get that from the film. But it at the same time, the scenes where they're shooting the film, not only it's funny because the original scenes are funny and they're recreating the original scenes, but the dialogue between Seth Rogen as the sort of director or the cinematographer or whatever, he's not the director, that stuff was very entertaining. There's a lot of really good stuff in the movie, but I'd rather watch The Room than watch The Disaster Artist. It doesn't deserve the Film of the Year nods it's getting by anybody. I don't understand where people are coming from on that. It's really not that great. But it's fine.
But just think about that for a second. A film based on The Room is in talks to get a Film of the Year.
It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. And I mean, it's one of the... It's something I never understand. I don't understand it at all with Rocky Horror Picture Show. The sort of cult thing going with that. But with a movie like this, I totally get it. Like... Where that movie is intentionally schlocky, it's not just a bad movie. You know, I don't think it's good. I think it's completely, I think it's kind of haphazard and lopsided very much towards the beginning of the film. But regardless, a movie like this, you understand this movie is really just, it's kind of shocking. And that's why it's so funny. And I don't feel like that effect is going to wear out because as much as I'd seen those scenes, when I watched it again, and like paid attention, I just enjoyed the hell out of them. Still, if I watched them on their own, I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's funny, haha. You know, if somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, hi, Mark," like that's stupid. But when I'm watching the movie and I see it happen, it's hilarious. It's like, how the fuck? So I mean, like on some level, like I totally get it, and it is kind of amazing because this thing was just some random indie movie. It would have never gotten recognized if you didn't pay for the billboard spot, basically. Or maybe some of the people who saw the original screening told their friends about it, but I don't know if it'd be to this point where I got a DVD of it in my room.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think the first time I heard about this was for a while, Adult Swim, I want to say on April Fool's Day, just played The Room over and over again all night.
Mm-hmm. They still do that, I think. I don't know, but I think they still do that. Yeah, and that's pretty funny. And I understand. That was one of the things that skyrocketed it because it had a very underground following that it was funny, and then Adult Swim played it, and now most people know it. And you get to the point where a movie like The Disaster Artist can be made, and I can be in theaters for completely other movies, and people laugh at it like they know what that is.
Yeah,
which is insane.
Which is crazy.
Is the first Troll as bad? I've never seen the first Troll. Why the fuck would I watch everyone only watches Troll 2. No one watches.
Yeah. Well, you saw Trolls.
I did see Trolls, which wonderful.
Is in the Trolls 2 universe.
Yeah. Troll 2 is a movie a lot. I actually prefer Troll 2, to be honest. This was very funny, but Troll 2 has the horror element to it, which makes it even funnier because that movie.
Yeah, what else would you put in this genre of film?
Yeah,
like Birdemic, Trolls 2.
I've never seen Birdemic. That movie looks like, for the most part, it's just so bad it's bad. Like that's definitely a worse movie than this. Just from what I've seen of it, it's clearly more incompetent.
Yeah, that's the thing about this film is it's like you can't really classify it's bad. So it's not like it's so bad it's bad. It's not a so bad it's good. It's just literally every second of this film, you mentioned it, every second of this film, you're like, is this intentional?
Yeah.
Like, did they do this
Yeah.
in this way that it's so bad that he actually made it that way.
Well-
and so you had mentioned, and there's the quote on the front of this box talking about how this is a quirky, dark comedy.
Read the quote.
Yeah,
for
I'll
the-
read
for
the
audience.
quote.
This is on the DVD.
This is a quote, by the way, it's quoted by no one.
It has
It's-
no source.
It's just a quote.
It's just a sentence in quotation marks.
Experience this quirky new black comedy. It's a riot.
Yeah. No. Well, here's the thing. See, I think I could easily classify this as so bad it's good. And I think it might be the quintessential so bad it's good movie because everybody knows it. I know pretty much, everyone knows pretty much for a fact at this point that this was not intentional because he only started doing the black comedy thing after people started laughing at it, which just shows he doesn't understand why people are laughing at it. Like, he fundamentally doesn't, I don't think he gets it. Like, because black comedies aren't just terrible films that are funny because they're so bad. That's like a schlock film or like a B-movie camp film. That's a camp film is what that would be. A black comedy is a movie that's a comedy with dark elements. That's not at all even close to anything what this movie is. Like, even if this was an intentional comedy, it still is not a black comedy. Just because he kills himself, it's a black comedy.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. And
I would argue there is nothing intentionally comedic about this film.
no. Well, I think there were moments where there was comic relief. But it's bafflingly weird. Like when he trips, that was comic relief. I'm almost certain of it. But it's not... It's funny, but it's funny because I don't know how the hell that was supposed to be funny. It's not just a real... Like, because this is... My friend Payson, the Cinemaster, I've had him on Normicast before, says this, and he's totally right, and I agree with this notion. There's nothing funny... Like, bad movies can always be funny, you know? But bad comedies can't be funny. Because if it's a bad comedy, it's a bad comedy because it's not funny. So that's like the worst of the bad movies, is a really bad comedy that's not funny. However, this film subverts that a little bit because the problem with that is a lot of those bad comedies are, you see where someone might find it funny, it's just terribly unfunny to you. Or you see the joke, you're just like, that wasn't delivered well at all. In this film, I just don't get it. Like, I watch a scene like that and I'm like, is it funny because he trips? And the way it's played off isn't comedic.
No.
It's actually played off kind of seriously. You can tell it was probably supposed to be a joke.
And then they laugh at him.
Yeah, and then he runs up like, are you okay? And it's just like, what the fuck? And that's another thing, is everything's so baffling. Even the comic relief, which you can tell there's a little bit of that. So that's the thing, is I'm very comfortable saying, like, and you're right, you do sort of question at points, you're like, they had to have meant for this to be this way. But I know they didn't. And I'm very comfortable saying that this film is just, it was completely sincere. And we know that. It's basically a fact at this point. This film was completely sincere. So Troll 2 I have reservations about. I'm still not certain on that one. There was a documentary about it I might need to watch to find that out. But that movie I'm not sure, honestly, if I'm fairly certain it was made in sincerity, but there are things in that movie, like when they eat corn and then popcorn comes in and then literally it cuts to him drowned in popcorn, where I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, that must have been like, they must have known.
Yeah.
But I understand that the director, I believe, was like foreign and was trying to direct a movie for an American audience or something like that. So there's some weird elements to that one where I can see how that might have been sincere. In this case, I'm certain it was sincere, and it just makes it all the better. But yeah, to your question that you had about, you know, putting this in, like, what other movies would be in this category? Obviously, A Troll 2 is in this category. I would say, for me at least, Norm of the North is in this category on the animated spectrum. For me, like, poorly animated films are very, very funny. Like, when it's so poorly animated that it's just like, what in the hell? Like, have you ever seen those Video Brinqueda? Or Video Brinqueda, I mean, Brinqueda, no. They do, like, mock 3D animation movies. Like, they did, one of the most famous film is The Little Panda Fighter, which it's just incredibly awful. Like, it's so primitive. And it was so that, like, a grandma might see it in a basket and think it's Kung Fu Panda, and they do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. But you see, the thing about A Norm of the North is I still don't feel like it's quite to the level of this, because that movie, I think they knew, they weren't intending for it to be bad, but they knew it was bad, and they put some self-aware humor in there, how they knew it was bad, and that makes it less funny. I want you to be totally sincere. If you're going to get to this level, you have to believe that your movie is a masterpiece. You know, if you know that what you're making is crap, it's just not quite as funny. The Nut Shack would be in this category. No, it would not. No, it would not. No. The Nut Shack is a bad comedy. The Nut Shack is not funny. I wanted to kill myself watching through that. No, I would absolutely not put it in this category. Yeah, so I mean, like...
Okay.
So a question I have for you...
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm going to have to be the first one to score and recommend the movie, but I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
Something that I've always sort of toiled... Well, I know my answer on, but a lot of people are iffy on this. So when a movie is like this... where it's clearly on all, like on pretty much every level, a complete piece of trash. And of course, I don't believe in objectivity in art, but I don't see anyone who would disagree with me on that. But the film is also incredibly entertaining, such that a movie that isn't quite as technically bad as this is less enjoyable, right? So this is more technically bad than, say, I don't know, what's a fucking movie? Tron, I guess. Tron, I watched. I'm just bored out of my fucking mind. That's the only example I can think of for some reason. But a movie like that, where it's just bad, and it's not like it's funny or entertaining or interestingly bad. It's just bad, and you're just like, oh, God. This movie is clearly far, far worse than those on a technical aspect, but would entertainment value, like, factor into your interpretation of how good the movie is?
That's an interesting question. I think that... So there are definitely some films, and I also don't really have any examples of them, where it's just like...
You just kind of forget them.
You forget them. It's boring. I wouldn't say that they're bad. Like, okay, I would put like the majority of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies in this category, where it's like, especially the last one I just watched, it's just like, it's not a bad film necessarily, but it's boring. It's just not well cut. I mean, it's just action for the sake of action. I would rather watch this than that. Now, I don't think that I would call this a better film, but this is something that I would rather be watching in front of me.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and you compare it to a Manos, The Hands of Fate, which is far worse than this, even on technical levels. Like, this film's lit acceptably. It's not good. It looks like a fucking TV. It's like the kind of lighting that's just boring and bland. Yeah. But you can still see everything that's happening. In Manos, you can't. The dialogue, for the most part, syncs up with their lips, except for the scenes where it doesn't, which does occur quite a few times in this film. But, like, in Manos, it doesn't. There's just so much about the audio quality in this is fairly crisp. You can hear it. Manos, you can't. So, there are worse films. But this film is in a similar oeuvre where it's like they're both just so awful that it's hard to really tell them apart. And I'd ultimately give them the same score, which I'll get to because there's literally no other way I couldn't. And so, but like, at the end of the day, this film is far more entertaining. So would that, for some people, that, like, people who score films, I know YMS, for example, I really enjoy him. He does this. Like, for example, The Last Airbender, he gives a 4 out of 10. He's given, like, films that are easily better on most levels, and he would even say probably on technical levels are better, like 2s and 1s. I think he gave Age of Ultron a 2, as opposed to The Last Airbender, which is 4. Obviously, The Last Airbender is worse, but he factors in his enjoyment factor into it. And there are elements of that, I think for some people, at least for him, he says that film is hilarious to him. He thinks it's hilarious. And so, I see, like, for me, I don't do that. Because in my opinion, it's not that I don't think there's some people seem to have this notion that there's an objective and subjective element to movies and art. I don't think that's true, because anytime you try to get into the nitty-gritty of of how you measure objective quality, it's clearly a bullshit notion. No one's ever been able to suggest a way in which you can actually do that, because then you have to factor out everyone who's ever experimented with the norm. And as soon as you do that, you can't get experimentation anymore, because now you're just doing it poorly, objectively. So I don't like that notion. However, I do think, for me, in a film like this, you can definitely see the difference between a purely entertainment value, subjective view of the film, and what you view to be technically good and technically well made. Those things are often separate. So, like, for me, this film is not, on pretty much any technical level, quality. You know, it's not on every technical level abysmal. On most technical levels, it's abysmal, but not on every single one, I suppose. But those things are just complete, like, even like the mediocre shot composition, that's not like that raises the film's quality. The story and acting is so fundamentally terrible that it doesn't matter. However, when I'm watching the movie, I'm seeing that and I'm like, this is a piece of shit, but I'm having so much fun. And I can't, at least in my opinion, I rate art and stuff based on director intent or artist intent in the case of music or something, and how well that intent came together in the end. Generally, for me, is how I would rank it. And in this case, this is a sincere product, and it did not come together in any of the. It's complete. It ended up being the complete opposite, where you're watching it from an ironic perspective.
Right.
If that happens, your movie is a pile of shit. Like, so that's the way that I see it. But it's an interesting conversation, and I hear people talk about that a lot. It's like, how do you rate a movie that's fun bad?
Yeah.
The same as you would if it were boring bad, in my opinion. Is the way I look at it. But
yeah, and that's why I think in this podcast, it's good that we both give some form of score, but also whether we would recommend or not recommend this movie. Because I think this is one of those examples
where you have an opposite.
Where we have an opposite. But
So
I'll let you
I'll
score
go
first.
for my score. So my score, like I said, I don't factor entertainment value into this. This movie is an easy 0 out of 10. 0.0, flat on 0. And like I said, there are going to be zeros that are worse, but once you get to this point, it doesn't fucking matter anymore, like so yeah, because I can't, because like I said, Manos is far worse, but I don't go to the negative, so Manos is a 0 too. So that's the way I view this film on that level. But would I recommend it? Yeah, of fucking course I would. Like, how the hell, you need to see this film. You need to watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, even bafflingly bad movies that are also zeros that aren't quite as fun are generally interesting to watch. So but this one is a whole nother level. It's fun. And people say you need to watch it with friends, which isn't even true. This movie is funny. Like, I watched, you can watch it as a comedy alone, and it's funny. So, yeah, but.
Well, I'm struggling a little bit now because I gave Filth a 2, and I would rather watch this than I would ever rather listen to that thing.
Yes.
No, but I would still give this a 1. I don't know if I would.
Is that your lowest?
That
I go to 0.
I could go to 0, but I think that because I do feel like there are things that are worse than this in almost every regard, I would give this a 1. Sure. I mean,
on a comparative level, I can see why.
On a comparative level, I don't think there's anything, like, there's not necessarily one thing that I would call out as something that's like, okay, this film has quality in X.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned it. Everything is at best mediocre. But so 1 out of 10. But yeah, absolutely, I would recommend this. Everyone should see this. Somehow in your life, you should see this, because watching this, it is indescribable as not just like how you feel about it, but just it. Like, how is it there? How is it happening in front of you? How did a team of people come together to create this so sincerely, put this out to the world, and now, I mean, even the front of the box of the DVD is literally just his face.
Yeah, this isn't the exact same box art you're seeing on screen. The box art doesn't have the little squares around his face. It's just the face that
and then,
I have.
like, you have the text, the font of the title, and then a diagonal shadow. Why?
Yeah.
What? All of it. It doesn't make any sense.
It's incredible.
It's incredible.
So, yeah, so of course we're going to be on the same page in this, obviously. I guess we gave it a different score, but yeah, like I said, I see what you're saying with the 1 to 10, but I don't necessarily score comparatively. Like, I think there's a certain point where your film is so awful and the redeeming qualities just do not matter. And besides, I don't really consider mediocre to be a redeeming quality.
No.
So I mean, like, so that's why I put it where I would. But yeah, I should mention that people will claim this is the worst movie of all time. That's just completely wrong. Like, there are tons of movies that are worse than this. And definitely tons of movies that are harder to watch. There are better films than this that are much harder to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, and I don't feel like this film, maybe my one thing that does hinder my enjoyment is it is a little longer than I prefer a so bad it's good. It's like an hour 40. It's not terrible, but like Troll 2 is like an hour 30 or an hour 20 or something. And that movie's just, that movie's a riot, and consistently there are, I guess, points of this movie where you're not really going to be laughing. So that's why I say I ultimately prefer Troll 2 as a so bad it's good. Another movie I would totally recommend. It used to be on Netflix. I don't know if it is anymore. But regardless, yeah. Honestly, in a way, The Room is kind of a classic.
Yeah.
Like, when you think about it, it has stood the test of time. This isn't going to be dated.
Right.
It's going to stand up to time. I think throughout time, this is going to maintain to be kind of like Plan 9 from Outer Space is.
Yeah.
It's going to maintain to be that's another movie in this category.
Yeah, for sure. Pretty much the majority of things on Mystery Science Theater 3000 you could put in this category.
Majority, but haven't they done Manos, or was it somebody else that did Manos?
They did Manos.
Okay, yeah, because Manos is don't watch that. I tried. I couldn't get past 10 minutes of that shit. I couldn't. I was just like, what the fuck? That was horrible. But yeah, but Plan 9, yeah, there's stuff out there that's like this, that if you enjoy this, definitely check that stuff out too. But I mean, they stand the test of time better than a lot of good movies from those eras do.
Yeah.
Because they never lose their value. But I feel like we're done. Let's see what we have. Some things that he said. So Paris said, I actually enjoy it unironically, and the flaws just enhance my enjoyment, honestly. Unironic. It's genius how something... Okay, he said this. Johnny's suicide was honestly so rewarding in the end. Every scene with Lisa and her mom is literally the same. Rocky Horror Picture Show is great. I don't agree. I don't... Have you guys seen Pink Flamingos? No, but I've heard of it. Have you heard of it?
I've not heard of
It's
it.
like a shock film.
Oh, okay.
Sort of. That's my understanding of it. The Nut Shack would be in this category. No one can objectively hate art. Yeah. Are you guys aware of Tanetta, Daniel Johnston, and Wesley Willis is my fucking man. You know Wesley Willis, right?
Yeah.
Yes, Wesley Willis is incredible. That's the musical equivalent of this.
Yeah, I could see that.
Wesley Willis.
Rock and Roll McDonald's.
Yeah. Plan 9 is actually my favorite movie of all time. Ed Wood is my favorite director. That's awesome. Daniel Johnston I've heard of, but I've never listened to. If you decide to invest, you are in for a treat. Yeah, Wesley Willis is incredible. I love him. All right, so we will go to the recommendation segment, I think, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So, Steven, you will begin.
Okay, so I'm gonna for the...
Be objective. Be objective.
Yeah. I do not
be
worry.
careful.
We have to be careful. It's hard when you're streaming live. I'm gonna mix it up a little bit for the new year. I'm actually going to be recommending you a YouTube channel. Whoa.
Okay, that's very exciting.
New stuff. Very exciting. So I'm gonna...
I'll tell you what, Jeremy, his eyes just sparkled. I have a chance.
Anything's game now. I'm gonna recommend you the Drawfee channel. So Drawfee, DRAWFEE. They're a collection of artists. One of them actually that heads it works at Disney now, but they were originally all located in the same New York office. They were between College Humor and Dorkly. So what they do is they just kind of get together. They have a couple different series, but the majority of what they do is they'll get some suggestion from commenters, and then they just talk over a Photoshop canvas and will draw whatever the suggestion might be. I am going to either recommend you watch the Morning Drawfee playlist, so a collection of videos from there, or the what do they call it? It's basically like knockoff. It's like a knockoff playlist, so a collection of videos from either one of those. I think will give you a good idea
How
of
much
how to.
should I watch?
Yeah, I'll let you decide. I know that I don't know if we've talked about this, but we have sort of a light recommendation for length of time for these things.
Yeah,
so
you have to be able to reasonably finish it in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
each
each of their videos is about half an hour or so.
I'd watch
so
a few. Yeah.
You can watch a few.
Okay, is that...
And that's my recommendation.
All right.
So Drawfee channel, specifically either the Morning Drawfee or the knockoff.
Let me, all right. Now it's my recommendation. I really need to get a new pictures for this. Okay. I recommend
you get a new picture.
I recommend a film. This is a film from this year. The film is called, in all lowercase with an exclamation point at the end, Mother. This film is directed by Darren Aronofsky. I don't know if you've seen an Aronofsky film, but he directed The Wrestler. He directed Requiem for a Dream, Black Swan, a whole number of films like that. I guess some details, it stars Jennifer Lawrence in the titular role as Mother. And that's all I'm going to say about it because I don't think I can say anything else.
Yeah, and is it Benicio? No, not Benicio del Toro. I know his face.
I don't know his name, but
yeah.
but you know, yes, it is that person that you're thinking of. I don't remember his name. Yes.
Okay. All right.
So that is the end of our show for today, I believe. We talked about doing a bonus episode later.
Yep.
Where we'll talk about The Last Jedi.
And that one, it sounds like probably won't be live streamed, so just be looking out for it. We'll record it and then we'll post it up. Just a little bonus episode.
And it's just because
this is a Lex's Season of Giving treat.
It's a momentous occasion.
Yeah.
A new Star Wars film is out.
Yes.
Steven's a giant fan of Star Wars.
Yes.
And he because we're on Get Recc'd, you can't really come on Normie Cast anymore. It'd just be weird and kind of unfair. So we'll do it here.
Yeah, we'll talk about it, and maybe we'll wreck it to you. That's our new. That's our new.
Fit it into the theme.
That's our new
by giving
tagline.
it a score
Wreck
and
it
then a
to you.
recommendation. You know what? But yeah. Anyway. So yeah, I guess that's it.
And we'll fit it into the theme by having our shitty pictures of ourselves.
Yes.
On the screen.
So, do you remember the outro to this show? Because I don't.
Of course I remember it, but I'm gonna let you do it.
Okay. Well.
No, I remember it.
Okay.
Those were our thoughts. Those were our recommendations. Get wrecked.